Welcome back and happy Tuesday. I have a lot on my mind that I want to talk about, and it's going to evolve around more contentious issues, so lots to look forward to and think about. One of them is going to be the idea of heaven and what we understand as something that we want to build, and we can't really find a shortcut to. So, like we said, it's usually something that we're building progressively with time, and we know that we're working towards, so if it doesn't materialize in one lifespan, at least we're working towards it. So no matter at what point we die, like if we're from infancy to anywhere between that and say old age, so 80 years old, maybe beyond that, if we're progressively working towards that, at any point that we die, we'll be already kind of on that path. So one of the beginning narrations that is kind of like a tradition that we all understand to be foundational to any kind of belief system is the importance of intention. So the idea being, if I'm waking up in the morning with the intention of I want to see what I can do today that I can improve on yesterday, even if it's just a little bit different, then that's what I want to do. So I talked about how sometimes I wake up and I think about a verse or something that resonated with me in the past that helps me think of the universe. And that's what I want to kind of begin my day with. And then hopefully that'll help me just begin my day on a good note. Lately, I've been thinking about prayer. I mentioned that sometimes the assumption is that a prayer has to look like a formal way of engaging in some kind of remembrance. I tried for almost 3 years to not look like I'm actually praying, but I'm remembering God or the universe in some kind of way that's internal and it's not really visible to the eye, just to kind of experiment with different ways of being and how I am almost rewarded in that by the universe. Also, almost to kind of allow for differences of opinion and how to practice living like in a lifespan. So there's not any one ideal or one standard. And this is kind of to help me kind of bridge a meaning that when people are wondering about, why don't you give like a prescriptive way of being in the world? It's basically to say that I can't say what is going to work for a particular person or what's going to resonate for them, and because knowing that or knowing how to do that would require that I be informed about what their whole history up to that point has been, so that I can actually almost customize what their future should be. The only person that knows that is God, right? He's the one that has your subconscious and can almost like know what to bring into your pathway to help some things manifest that'll kind of bring to the fore or to your memory, like, oh, maybe this is what I want to work on because this is what kind of resonates as maybe missing or deficient, and I need it to be awoken in some way. So knowing that, you can almost assume that, it's basically everybody's fundamental job within themselves to want to even just think about it. So just think, I'm a stranger in the world, and what is it that I need to help me be informed? Now, God already hears that inspiration, so he'll just open something for you, right? It's just like you can't wonder about the universe without having the universe meet you in a closer way. So it's that, you go one step, the universe will come 10 steps. You go like 5 inches, it'll come 50. It'll always do more for you than you're giving. And that's just God. He's the generous, he's the compassionate, he's the one who's there saying, I want you to realize the creative prowess that's within you, which will inform you about the creativity in the universe. So yesterday, I think it was at the end of the day, I was really tired. I went to the gym. I didn't eat a typical diet. So I talked about how sometimes we habituate to a certain practice and we need to break it in some way. So I went to the gym and then I bought some instant oatmeal and some Greek yogurt. And I thought I'm going to try that with a little bit of chocolate syrup. Typically after I work out, I have like those protein milkshakes, like powder shakes, and then eggs. Because that's just like I took a food science course and they said that a whole egg has a lot of the nutrients that our body requires that may not necessarily be something that our body can synthesize. So it's just a good food to have in our diet. So because I didn't have that typical kind of post-workout meal, for some reason my day was just, I felt really, really, really tired. And I was just like, I don't want to do anything. I was just really sleepy. So it's almost like my body had kind of formed like an efficient way of existing. And then breaking that was almost like my body was like, it almost had to work harder to stay awake and to kind of function. So I was like, that's kind of cool. That's almost like the way our thinking is, right? If you think, I talked about how Omar, he was aware after the fact that he was grateful for the prophet coming with the message, because he realized the importance of breaking a norm that he's habituated to that wasn't actually helpful for him. So for me, it was, I'm going to try and find something in my mind or something that I'm thinking about that's going to be new. So on the way, so I left, I think it was like 8 o'clock in the evening. I just went down to the grocery store, and as I was walking, I was like, so what is it about me that I can change? I was like, well, I know that for anybody, like any outsider who hasn't maybe been following my videos, I look like a stranger. Like, I don't seem like anybody would know anything about me other than what I'm telling people. So I was like, okay. And I remember also a long time ago, I used to attend these Friday sermons, and Tuba is a place in heaven. And God says it's a place for those who are strange in the world, meaning they don't want to conform, which is basically a postmodern existence. So as I was thinking that, I was like, oh, cool. So anyway, on the way back, the same spot where I remembered that narration is where I remembered it on the way back. So it was almost like, this is what I mean, where the universe just confirms for you that it's listening and that God's there and you're not alone. So even if you do feel alone and that there's no one in the world to support you, just having that intention of, well, I'm not going to let that stop me, because I know there's something bigger than whatever looks like it's materially there, technologically, or as like people that can support me. So knowing that, you almost kind of wonder like, well, why isn't this something that's taught in school? And that's exactly the reason why. Because school is limited. People are limited. We can't be God. And so knowing that, it's almost like, well, what can we teach as a foundation in schools that will enable us to think and appreciate the benefit of knowledge and learning? And then from there, every individual has the capacity to just be in the world and then discover, like, what is it for me as an individual person that's going to help me develop into the identity I want to become. So I used to think about Catholic schools, and I don't remember, maybe I knew one or two girls that went to Catholic school, but I don't remember actually being in contact with them while they were in Catholic school. So I believe it's something that's funded by the government, almost to say we're trying to uphold something of our tradition around the time of Christ. But then, like, I don't really know what their practices are throughout the school day, other than that maybe they have like a prayer of the Lord, somewhere at the beginning, and then maybe during the curriculum they have something about world religions that they study, and maybe people have the option of opting out of that. So maybe that's all it is. It's just a kind of reminder throughout the day. And then people who want to go to public school are welcome to go to public school. So if they don't want that at all, so you have two options. So I really love that, because it gives the people the power within themselves to say, I can still choose, even if I understand this is something in the universe that's bigger than what anybody can actually offer. With that, we also know that we should be trying to understand what this agent or this being is in the world. So the reason I say this is because being somebody who has knowledge before something, like being informed before you try and error something that looks kind of contentious, is so empowering. Like, if I know, like some of these examples that I give where one person chooses an action that is maybe a bad choice, and the impact it has around them, like in a concentric circle, so the idea of having somebody do an action and they're not aware of the impact that it'll have on the people around them, is very difficult to deal with after the fact, right? You can think in hindsight, like, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't done this, because look at the impact that it had, and it just, maybe it destroyed families, maybe it came between relationships, maybe it derailed someone from like a path that would have been okay. We can't really know how that person's action will actually manifest in the long run, and whether their intention will improve, which will actually improve the circumstances or not. What we know is God asks us to be informed and to just be in the world. So it's almost to say, your responsibility as a person who's thinking and who knows that they are thinking, different than an animal who's just running on instinct, is that before you try something, you should try to figure out what it is that you're getting into. So be resourceful, right? So when I went to Carleton, I wanted to study something about what's the best way to raise children based on the prophetic time. So I understood just kind of superficially that it was kind of just a regular society. It was very primitive. People were just going about the regular day. And they had somebody who's inspired named Muhammad who liked to kind of almost augment what everybody was doing with inspired ideas and to almost answer their questions. So if people understood and started to believe that, yeah, you have a pretty clear message that's different from what we're used to understanding, and we want to believe in it. And we believe in it because when we ask you questions and you give us answers, the answers almost make sense, and they make sense in the world. Like everything just fits and becomes more facilitated. So that is basically what I was talking about with that story about me going to the store and finding myself almost meeting with an answer on the way there and on the way back at the same point. So this is what confirms faith and confirms belief for people. Like when they see this, they're just like, this isn't a natural pattern that could be somehow created like in a film, right? It's not like it's timed. It's not like somebody else is in it. It's just you and yourself and the universe. So to say that somebody shortcutted this or sort of intervened and did this is like, it can't happen. There has to be something bigger than this mundane world that's allowing for all these beliefs to continually reaffirm themselves. So knowing that, then you think, okay, so then what happened? Well, I mean, I went to school and I went to study, and for some reason, maybe because the time that I went there was 12 years ago, people weren't really aware of the impact Sufism can have on an individual outside of what normative kind of Muslim practice is in life. So people who practice Islam and call themselves Muslim, they're usually aware of there's these 5 pillars of Islam that I talked about, I think in one of my playlists about postmodern Islam, which is you witness that, there's something greater than you in the universe. You want to pray, you want to be charitable with yourself and with others. You like to fast, so you're trying to find some way to delay gratification. Sometimes people choose to fast during the month of Ramadan. And then you want to travel to a sacred place in Mecca in Arabia, which kind of reaffirms the whole narrative of God through time sends people with a message to help them realign with the universe and progress them through civilization to help them almost know how to adapt to a healthy way of living. That's basically the premise or the foundation for what Islam is, which is just a way of embodying all the previous traditions that came since Adam, to say that we are monotheists, meaning we realize that the world, even though it's permanent, it has a very temporary aspect to it, where things are there, but then, if there was like a tornado that goes through and it's not there anymore, God is still there. You're still there if you're thinking about it and you survived it. You can rely on God to help you. So that permanence of God and you, as it were, is basically what God is trying to say. Like your subconscious will remain with God. And after you die, after you've lived your lifespan, when you go into your next life, if you've tried to build your lifespan into something that's an ethical one, it'll reward you in your next life after you regenerate again and find your next life. So I think 12 years later, having come back from Carleton, I learned a lot. For example, that I am not somebody who practices Islam maybe the way the majority of Muslims practice, that maybe our relatives or friends. That's maybe something they're having a hard time trying to align with, and that's okay, because studying something formally is different than studying it like in a popular culture way or like a traditional handed down kind of family oriented way. Also, having a third party perspective from somebody who hasn't studied Islam formally is very refreshing, because it allows you to see, well, what do people understand, and what is it that I maybe have been defensive about that I don't need to be defensive about, but people just don't have aligned understandings, and maybe there's something I can clarify. So that is why I have kind of experimented with myself and my whole kind of idea of an identity and like regular habitual practices. So taking a break off of actual formal prayer, I realize just makes me a very agitated person, because I don't have that habituated time out of my day to just retreat, kind of forget about the day, and just meditate on like these really, really rich meanings of being grateful, praising God, looking forward to understanding, deeper meanings of reality and existence, and then going back to my day. So knowing that is almost like, okay, before I get to that, like returning to that habit of my day, I want to see, kind of compare it, like, okay, what if people try different kinds of prayer? How, like, I don't want to judge them. I don't want to say that they're doing it right or wrong. And then what would I do if I was like a person in government? Like, I talked about how we want to be informed about the benefit of remembrance in the world, so that when people see like magic or sorcery, they don't jump to that instead of going to prayer, right? Because then it's almost like you have to kind of go through that trial and error, and then you have to almost, it's not mess things up, but then you kind of create a mess in the world, and then people almost have to kind of deal with that, and maybe that will be what causes them to go to prayer and find God. So it's not to say that trying in the world is not a good idea. It's almost to say it's important, and God praises it, and He will help you. And maybe in some way you'll come across people who would have tried sorcery or tried to sell it and suggest it was a good idea, and then find, no, maybe I should stop this. And that's enough for them. That's enough of a prayer for them. So there's no way, that's why there's really no prescriptive way of existing in the world, other than that God will be there to kind of help you, and He'll be sufficient for you. Like, He'll suffice. He'll say, like, if you know that God is enough for you, He'll create in the world meaningful ways for you to exist that will be enough for you. That'll almost give you that kind of contentness. Like, I don't need more. This is good. And then somehow you'll just find increase in your life. So one of the things that I want to stress, first of all, is that I talked about how we are basically responsible for our life from infancy to death. But it's not until we hit puberty that we have to actually start taking account for our actions. So we have to start worrying about, like, okay, I'm maybe 13 and I'm going to high school and I want to, make friends. But first of all, as I'm making friends, I'm learning about a little bit about who I am, and then who do I want to make friends with, because they're going to be the ones that support me, and that may be, I have to worry about peer pressure with. So I talked about sexuality, for example. Like, if I'm not ready to be somebody who explores sexuality, and they are they going to bully me, or are they going to tease me? Are they going to make fun of me? Are they going to force me to do something I'm not ready for? So knowing that, now you're informed, and you say, okay, so now when I go to high school, I'm not going to be scared, because I'm going to start thinking about this already. So if I already have these kinds of friends, maybe I have to decide, maybe we're not going to be friends anymore. Maybe we go to the same school, we have the same classes, we talk, but if I'm not able to stand up for myself enough without you continuing to bully me, maybe we can't be friends. So that's actually something I want to talk about. Like, I ordered a vibrator yesterday, actually, on Amazon, just because I feel like knowing something about sexuality, and then safe practices, and how do people get pregnant, and what are the importance, what is the importance of being aware of sexually transmitted diseases or illnesses, and why are some of them more almost scary more than others, because some of them can actually create sterility, where you actually can't procreate or can't have kids after. Some of them can come and go. So all of these things are, so basically safe practice would mean like you have to wear a condom. So all of these things are important for us to know. And some families, they shy away from talking about it. But when you normalize it and you just say, look, if I was maybe someone who was 14 years old and being told about this, like back in 1996, I would have been like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And maybe some kids are like that. And that's good, because then it's like, okay, well, now I can start thinking about it, because there are parts of the world where people are really advanced about this at a younger age. And maybe they would expect that everybody knows this. And there's no harm in knowing something and then not practicing it. It's just there for when you decide, I'm interested in somebody and I think I want to get to know them. It's good that I already have this kind of background information, almost like in my mind somewhere, that I can easily refer to. So this is something that helps us understand something about heaven. So when we read chapters in the Quran, it talks about, especially in, I think the 55th chapter is called the Compassionate. God, just after like verse after verse, He'll talk about all the different things we can be grateful for. And then after each description, He'll say, so what bounty around you can you deny? Or almost say doesn't exist for you to enjoy. Almost saying that everything in the world is available for you to enjoy and to kind of explore, but you have to learn the ethic around it. So if you find out that when you were a kid you did an allergy test and you're allergic to peanuts, right? And then you go to somebody's party and they have, peanut and Reese's Pieces brownies. So you can't say, well, God said I'm allowed to enjoy it, therefore I'm going to. You know that's going to make you sick, and it's actually could actually kill you because your lungs will swell and you can't breathe, and then you die if you don't have your EpiPen with you. So in that way, it's almost like God's helping us remember that not everything in the world is there for us to enjoy. And if there is, we have to understand the ethic, meaning we have to understand how we're supposed to interact with it, which involves delayed gratification. We have to kind of slow down. And then we have to be charitable with ourselves and say, well, is this actually going to be healthy for me or is it not? And to what degree should I have from it? Like, should I have just a little piece or should I have a lot? And if I have a lot, is that going to be okay? Is it going to make me sick? So all of these things are basically, again, just to show us, like, God created you. He knows what's good for you and he's helping you. And you can choose to listen and you can choose to just experiment with that manual, as explained before. So going back to the idea of Catholic schools, you can think, okay, let's pretend I'm somebody who's 18 or 20. I took 2 years off to work and maybe I'm 24. And now I'm thinking about going to university, but I'm actually thinking of going to a seminary. So the difference between the two is that a seminary is a place where they study different ideas about religion. So there's more emphasis on God. Whereas in a public university, it usually talks more about evolution. It'll rarely include anything regarding the study of God or theology. So trying to bridge the two is basically what I tried to do at Carleton. And I didn't know that I couldn't, because basically the faculty there, when they study something, they don't study the effect that studying it will have on a person. They want to understand why people practice this. So it's almost like, where's that nuance? Because that was basically my trouble. Like, I was like, I can't understand how I'm practicing this and I realize that it has an effect on me. But somebody who doesn't realize that about faith and practicing religion will say, like, are you like a magician? Like, what are you a robot? Like, they don't see, because they're just immersed in technology, that they don't see that studying God and involving and almost calling on God in your life just has that facilitated miraculous existence that for the person practicing, they're like, yeah, I know this is who I am, and that's why I'm practicing. So this is what I expect and this is my reality. So for me, I almost had to pause and drop out and almost allow myself to step out of that and be like, okay, I'm going to abandon this so that I can step into somebody's shoes who hasn't experienced this at all, doesn't have an idea of the impact that studying God and like worshiping God has on your life. And I'm going to just try to be secular, meaning, I may think about God and the universe in a way, but I can't talk about it because I don't have the words for it. And maybe I don't realize that I'm worshiping God just by studying God in a way. And that my existence is in some way charmed or enchanted, but I just don't realize it. So doing that was very difficult for me because at first I was like arguing with myself. Like, so I'd read a verse in the Quran and I'd say, so what is it that I'm unable to see? Like, I'm thinking if I was talking to somebody who maybe agreed with me that, calling on God or praying has no use. And then I would say, well, what if there is no point to it all? And so all these different ideas at the same time can be very tricky if you already know the answer within yourself and you're almost trying to help yourself forget so that you can appreciate how difficult it is for somebody outside of this norm that they maybe grew up into or took for granted that it's just part of who I am, can see. So it took as long as it did, 12 years. And now that I'm thinking about it, I see how people who are within a religious tradition maybe want to create a government that creates this way of living. And that's very dangerous because as I mentioned before, it takes away so much freedom of expression. It takes away so much of that freedom of exploring the world without having to worry about, am I in trouble with the universe and with the government and with the people around me? And it creates a zeitgeist that gets very restrictive. And a zeitgeist, as I mentioned, is basically a political climate. So like the government, which is like a majority of the people electing somebody. But then it's also your circle of friends. So your social network tends to be like a traditional norm that involves that. So it could be like, for example, if it's a secular government that wants to be Muslim, let's say. So it'll say, within our Muslim, so let's pretend we're in Saudi Arabia. So let's assume the government wants to be secular, meaning, well, we're going to allow for the selling of alcohol and drugs and all this because we know we have visitors and tourists from outside. And then within that, if you're a Muslim, if you're caught drinking this, you're going to get in trouble. Then it becomes like, what? That's kind of confusing. Like, it's almost saying that you're forcing me to be a kind of Muslim that I know the Quran says I have to be careful, but it's not allowing me to try something new that's new to the postmodern world. Like, you're keeping me stuck in 1400 years ago, assuming that we haven't civilized or like moved ahead 1400 years ago. So that's what dangers are kind of inherent in government building around knowing a fundamental truth that God is there. And it's almost as if God allows for these diversities. Like, he doesn't want us to all be like robots or minions all doing the same thing. Like, if you think of Gru and Despicable Me, right? You find that all the minions, even though they kind of look the same, they all have different characters and they might look like they're all doing the same thing, but they're still their unique self. So you can think of that as thinking about a picture of people who do pilgrimage in Mecca, right? We all look like we have the same garb on, like the cloth that we kind of wrap around our bodies. But each individual person has their unique subconscious, and they're there for different reasons. So mostly the idea is to go there and pray. So not everybody's going to be praying for the same material thing in the world. They might be praying for forgiveness, like, oh my gosh, I really need to be guided because at work I'm having a really difficult time. God, please help me choose if I need to find another job or not. So within each independent person, in those like millions that are there, we all look the same to help us remember that no one's actually better than anybody else. We are all struggling. We all have beating hearts. We all have, like, if you peel off our skin, we look exactly the same, aside from maybe, some people might have more muscle on their body. Some people might have more fat on their body. But that's basically it. Like, our function of our human self is the same. And that's a healthy reminder because it allows us to appreciate the creative power of God in a new light. Like, even though we are all the same, we're like almost exactly the same on the inside, the way our body works. But on the outside, we're so different. And then you start to think about, yeah, we are actually created different because some people are born from different countries and then genetically their bodies change. And then you think, like, even if we are the same, we're so different, even on the inside. And then you realize how difficult it is to think of one person or like a God sustaining all of this and making it work without it ever falling apart, as it were. So I'm going to keep this there. In my next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about safe income and why taking shortcuts in a lifespan, like I said, it doesn't really advance you in any way. It actually holds you back. Because if you're working towards something ethically, then God's there. And he's going to say, I'm going to help you. Like, if you go one step forward, I'm going to like jump you ahead and then keep doing that with you. If you try to take a step backwards, then God's not even there to help you. So you're basically stuck. And then you're affecting other people and holding everybody back. So knowing that about how to engage in a healthy way of living, a healthy way of making money, not taking shortcuts, all of these ways are what's called steps of yourself. That's a subconscious that it's almost, I don't want to say lazy, but it's almost having a hard time understanding the world. So it doesn't know why it should be somebody who tries like a more difficult but ethical way. So in that way, it's almost like, okay, well, God's allowing you to make mistakes, and he's going to probably surround you with people who know a lot to help you, like maybe not get in trouble and say, I'll get you in trouble by not being your friend, which means you might feel bad about yourself and then decide, I don't have any more friends to help me. And then maybe you'll call on God, and then God will help you find a way that'll maybe become more ethical. And then you'll be able to fix your mistakes and then move on. And then you'll find the reason to build a habit that makes you want to be somebody who doesn't look for shortcuts. And then after that, I want to talk a little bit about just safe practices. So I'm going to assume I'm a 13-year-old and I have a vibrator because I want to explore with myself sexually before I let somebody kind of explore my body with me. And then I'm going to buy condoms, and I'm going to try to understand what that is. So if a person is 13 years old and from a traditional family and their parents walk in on them, like, how would they explain themselves? Would they be allowed to explain themselves, or would they just get in a lot of trouble? So I'm going to leave it at that, and something for us to all think about until the next video.